Right Side News, bring you the right news for the right side. I'm Jim Hoel, and I am your voice. Thank you and welcome to the Hoel Report. Good evening and Happy New Year, America. I hope you all had fun ringing in the new year, as I know I certainly did. And we have a new year. The government is still shut down. It's known as the Trump shutdown. And today, I believe he even said himself that, he'll own it. He'll call it the Trump shutdown if you want to. So, sure, I guess we'd call it the Trump shutdown. Who the hell cares? I mean, we all know who's truly responsible. But, he was having fun today. So, it seems like the president's still having a good time. While these moronic Democrats are still trying to pander and withhold funding for a border wall that we certainly need, and they're going to continue to do that. They're obstructionists, and that's really all that they're good for, is obstructing. So that's what we got going on. As far as that goes, the government is still shut down. This is interesting. Senator Elizabeth Warren announced that she's running for president. So Pocahontas has officially announced her candidacy for the 2020 election. I believe she's the first to do it. She certainly won't be the last, but, so Pocahontas is running. So that's right now we have Pocahontas. I'm sure Hillary will announce at some point whether or not she is, but she probably will. But, so we have Senator Warren, Pocahontas, being the first to, I believe she's the first Democratic candidate to announce her candidacy. I'm not sure. But she announced it. So Pocahontas is running for president. So we got that too. So Pocahontas, Jesus. Boy, it's they're gonna have a hell of a time. The Democrat Party is going to have a hell of a time. With right now, Pocahontas is probably the Democratic frontrunner for the 2020 primaries, but that'll change. We'll see. We'll see what goes on, but that's funny. Anyway, getting into more news. With the last few days, we've been getting reports about Mitt Romney, and his disdain. Once again, showing his disdain and hatred of our president. Mitt Romney is this is an article posted to Right Side News by Kincaid, and it's called "How Mitt Romney is Plotting His Revenge on Trump." The new leader of the anti-Trump resistance in the Senate, Mitt Romney, will take the oath of office on January 3rd. So he'll take the oath of office tomorrow. The former Massachusetts governor and failed GOP presidential candidate represents what would be called the re-emergent Rockefeller wing of the Republican Party. You may recall that Mitt Romney delivered the most scathing anti-Trump speech by a Republican during the 2016 election when he went on national TV to call the now President of the United States a phony and a fraud. Romney wrote in his wife's name on Election Day in 2016 rather than for Trump. And he has said that he is not yet ready to endorse the president for re-election in 2020. After President Trump was elected, Romney was summoned for an interview for a position of some kind within the Trump administration, his believed Secretary of State, and he even got a follow-up interview. Now, some say that Romney got played. One journalist noted it was payback. Nothing materialized, and Romney went to Utah to plot his political comeback. One day after we recorded our new video, Can Trump Survive Until 2020, which looks like the background of never Trump Senator Romney, we noticed with interest that an anti-Trump Washington Post journalist by the name of Jennifer Rubin wrote about how Romney is the ideal person to fight Trump's agenda. that was by Jennifer Rubin of the Washington Post, who wrote, Romney is the ideal person to fight Trump's agenda. The Washington Post, one of the newspapers that was dedicated to his defeat, and that ran a paragraph at the end of every article they ever ran about him, saying how much of a racist he is and how he's unfit to be president. So that's the standard for that's the standard, I suppose, for what these people write. But that's the Washington Post for you. The liberal writer went on to say that Romney has a chance to begin the party's revival, contain a quote, lawless president, and prevent domestic and international calamities. She explained that the Senate has a principle, sanity, and the gravitas deficit created by the passing of Senator John McCain and enlarged by the retirements of Senators Bob Corker and Jeff Flake, who realized that after initially looking at it, that they would have been trounced in any primary, and they would have been stomped all over. So instead of running for re-election, they decided to save face and just retire, which is good. We don't need them. They're rhinos, obstructionists. They're just members of, their disdain and hatred of the president is shown all the time. However, perhaps the one person who can was Senator Mitt Romney, who can fill the void that was left by those men. This journalist went on to suggest that Republican Senators Tom Tillis of North Carolina, Joni Ernst of Iowa, Cory Gardner of Colorado, and Susan Collins of Maine can be enlisted in an effort to stall Trump's agenda. Of these, Collins is already a power broker, having cast the deciding vote for the Supreme Court Justice Brett Kavanaugh. He promised her that he would defer to previous Supreme Court decisions on abortion and gay rights, and he delivered within his recent ruling in favor of Planned Parenthood. So Gardner made a name for himself by stalling various Trump nominees in exchange for a promise to accept the legalization of marijuana on a national basis. Gardner's marijuana bill is sponsored by Democratic Senator Elizabeth Warren, who just entered the 2020 presidential race. Pocahontas. So that's what we got going on. We give deals being made to try to thwart Trump's agenda, and by these morons who, weed should be legal, sure. But if you're going to use it as a political ploy or a tool to get, why not just, see, that's the kind of games these people play. But anyway. Republicans, such as those listed by Rubin and led by Romney, could help make an impeachment conviction of Trump a strong possibility in the new Senate. Now, as I've warned before, and I will warn again, if they tried something that stupid without any evidence at all, we would see a crisis in the United States the likes of which we've never seen. That would cause a constitutional crisis. It would certainly lead to violence. So essentially, yes, once again, they're calling for violence. As you and I both, I know it, you know it, and everybody knows it. If they tried something that stupid, that they're playing with fire. And there would be violence, trust me. His base is the president has a very strong and very loyal base who are not morons. These people are not idiots. They see this for what it is, trying to discredit and sabotage his presidency. And if they tried to impeach him, they would be lighting their own party on fire. Over half the Republican Party now would be in open revolt if they tried something that stupid. Trust me, mark my words. Over half of the Republican Party would be in open revolt if they tried to do something that stupid. So, we'll see. But the fact remains is that I strongly believe that would be a disaster the likes of which this country has never seen. And one that would lead to a constitutional crisis, and God knows what else. So, Once again, the rabid impeachment fanaticism that is being spun on by these Democrats and these morons and even some Republicans is, for one thing, do they even know? I mean, do you know how stupid these people are? Do they even know what they're advocating here? They're essentially advocating martial law. They're advocating anything like that would instigate a constitutional crisis in this country. And what would probably happen would be martial law. So that's what these people are asking for. I mean, that's what these people are trying to pull. I mean, if they tried to impeach him, yeah, trust me, the end result would not be what they hoped. And it would turn out very, very bad for them if they tried something that stupid. So, they better not, but anyway. Getting more into the story. Could something happen to Trump? On the most recent edition of America's Survival TV show, investigative journalist Steve Baldwin described Romney's record of fake conservatism and how he could posture as a reasonable Republican. Right. He portrayed himself during the campaign as a conservative, Baldwin said of Romney. However, his record as the governor of Massachusetts was very, very weak. In fact, he led the country on three of the left's most cherished issues: cap and trade, gay marriage, and socialized medicine. In fact, I was just talking to a friend of mine tonight who, he's he's an independent, and he, like me, does not like Mitt Romney at all. In fact, that's where we agree on, where, he's more liberal leaning, I'm more conservative. But we enjoy talking politics, and we were talking about how Mitt Romney was basically the father of Obamacare before it was Obamacare in Massachusetts. And that's truth. Mitt Romney is responsible for the health, for the Massachusetts, I guess they called it Romney Care back then, I don't know. But he is really, really a rhino. That much is clear, and his record has shown that. He's not really a conservative at all. He's a rhino who is also an obstructionist, and will probably stop at nothing to try to sabotage and bring down the President of the United States as well. Romney is now in a position to break off a few key senators and cause Trump trouble, as Trump pursues his American First agenda. In an article headlined "How Mitt Romney Could End Up Running the United States 6 years After Losing the Presidential Election," Elaine Kimark noted that Republican Senator Romney will have what no other Republican senator has: a Republican constituency that does not like President Trump. Trump came in third in the Republican primary in Utah in 2016. And in the general election, a large number of voters voted for the independent Mormon, conservative Evan McMullin, rather than pull the leather for Trump or Hillary. McMullin, a former CIA operative, received 21% of the vote, compared to 45% for Trump and 27% for Hillary. Baldwin, a former California legislator and executive director of the Council of National Policy, wrote an entire book on Romney that was ultimately rejected by a conservative publishing house that was fearful of offending the establishment Republicans. In one of the chapters, The Buying of a Movement, he alleged that Romney captured the 2012 GOP presidential nomination by not only falsely advertising himself as a conservative, but by funneling donations from his family foundation to influential conservative groups. Mitt Romney is, I believe he's a billionaire. He's got a lot of money. Mitt Romney's got a lot of money. So, money talks, and I'm sure his money did a fair share of talking. Groups like my own America's Survival Inc. had published documentary evidence of Barack Hussein Obama's communist connections back in 2008. Romney did not win the GOP nomination in that year, but it went to Senator John McCain. But he wasn't interested in bringing any of that to the public's attention. And he lost an easily winnable race against Obama. In my opinion, McCain was really outmatched from day one. I went to the poll. I voted for the guy, knowing he was going to lose. In 2012, when Romney won the nomination and ran against Obama, Joel Gilbert released a popular documentary, The Dreams of My Real Father, drawing on our material and going into substantial detail about Obama's Marxist roots. Gilbert had argued that the right strategy to defeat President Obama was to expose his Marxist views, including the role of communist Frank Marshall Davis in molding of Obama's political philosophy. But Romney and top Republicans once again disagreed. Karl Rove told Republican donors, if you say he's a socialist, they'll just go out and defend him. If you call him a far-out left-winger, they'll just say no, and he's not. Rove said that Republicans had to adopt a respectful tone in criticizing Obama. And this is the same Karl Rove that, if you remember, on election night in 2020, had a complete meltdown on air because he could not believe that Mitt Romney lost the election. An election that I had thought was over from October, when the man disappeared and just stopped campaigning for like the entire month of October. I was like, well, this race is over. You know, Obama was going on Letterman and the Today Show and Oprah and, getting, nightly segments on the news. Well, Mitt Romney was nowhere to be found. So, either these morons just didn't know what the hell they were doing, or they just sabotaged their own candidate. It doesn't really matter, but the point is that by contrast, Gilbert argued, if Republicans had made Obama's Marxist agenda and personal background one of the main issues of the campaign, if they had focused on that, Americans would have had a much clearer understanding of the choice between American values and Marxism. Romney has now followed up his failed 2012 presidential campaign with a successful run in the Senate from Utah, which really is due to his base of Mormon and Mormon wealth. Mike Kennedy, a state lawmaker who ran against Romney and tried to warn Utah voters during the primary that Romney was a carpetbagger, flip-flopper, and during the campaign, also independent candidate in the primary, Tim Alders, argued that Romney was actually a progressive who was out of step with conservatives. Which, Mitt Romney is, in my opinion, a horse's ass. But anyway, Sam Bushman, the host of Utah-based Liberty Roundtable's radio show, says, I believe Romney is still young enough that he thinks he has another shot at maybe being president or staying in long-term power in the Senate. He doesn't care which, as long as he maintains power. At the current time, according to the latest McLaughlin and Associates survey, 72% of Republicans favor Trump in the 2020 race, and only 9% back Romney. This suggests that Romney's approach will be to get accolades from the Washington Post and other media outlets that despise Trump and really they all admit it. It was admitted by their editors-in-chief that their sole purpose of reporting on him during the 2016 campaign was to prevent him from winning. This was all admitted by their editors-in-chief, the Washington Post, the New York Times, the Huffington Post, but several. They all admitted that, their editors-in-chief all admitted that their sole purpose of reporting on him was to bring him down. And they're still going to try to do that. At that point, Romney could decide to run for president again, or perhaps settle for vice president under Mike Pence. That would be the case for Mitt Romney's revenge. So we have Mitt Romney out there again. Personally, I don't like the man at all. I think he's an empty suit. Like I said, he's a horse's ass. To have a guy, Donald Trump went out and endorsed him in 2012. President Trump was, I believe he was asked by the Romney campaign. Now, how serious this all was, I don't know. At the time, Donald was a political outsider. However, that being said, Donald Trump went out and endorsed Mitt Romney, gave him his endorsement for the 2012 election. How did Mitt Romney repay him? He repaid him by going on national TV, blasting him for nearly an hour, and calling him a phony and a fraud, and going into lying about his business dealings, and trying to tell the American people that we were all being taken advantage of by some sort of Manchurian candidate. And, I don't know where he stands in all this Russia stuff, but it wouldn't surprise me if he is a heavy proponent of it. So that's what that story is. Mitt Romney is back at it again in trying to delegitimize the presidency of Donald Trump, and is joining along with the Democratic obstructionists and radical impeachment fanaticists who want to bring him down. So that's the story there. Something that ties into this whole thing too, which we've covered, God knows how many times. However, this came out today. This is posted on Fox News. I'll include the links. This is by Howard Kurtz, Fox News contributor. Former New York Times editor rips Trump coverage is biased, and this is coming from a former New York Times editor. A former executive editor of the New York Times has come out and said that the paper's news pages, the home of its straight news coverage, have become unmistakably anti-Trump. Jill Abramson, the veteran journalist who led the newspaper from 2011 to 2014, says that the Times has a financial incentive to bash the president, and that the imbalance is helping to erode the New York Times credibility itself. So you see that what these publications and media outlets are doing. They are essentially sabotaging themselves, and it's even now they're even coming. Now even former editors of the New York Times are coming out and saying this. In a soon-to-be published book, The Merchants of Truth, that casts a skeptical eye on the news business, Abramson defends the Times in some ways, but offers some harsh words for her successor, Dean Baquet. And Abramson, who was the paper's only female executive editor until her firing, invoked Steve Bannon's slam that in the Trump era, the mainstream media had become the opposition party. That more or less is true. The mainstream media in the United States is not trusted. Not at all. American people they're not buying it, they're not watching it, and they're dying. The legacy media in this country is dying out. The mainstream media in the next 10 to 20 years, it'll be so far gone that it'll cease to exist as we know it now. So that much is true. Though Baquet said publicly he didn't want the Times to be the opposition party, his news pages were unmistakably anti-Trump. Abramson writes, adding that she believes the same is true of the Washington Post, another one I've mentioned. Some headlines contained raw opinion, and did some of the stories that were labeled as news analysts. News analysis. The headlines contained opinions, not fact, but opinions. What's more, she says, citing legendary 20th century publisher Adolph Ox, the more anti-Trump the Times was perceived to be, the more it was mistrusted for being biased. Ox vowed to cover the news without fear or favor sounded like an impossible promise in such a polarized environment. Abramson describes a generational split at the Times with younger staffers, many of them in digital jobs, favoring an unrestrained assault on the presidency. The more woke staff thought that urgent times called for urgent measures. The dangers of a Trump presidency obliviated the old standards, she writes. Trump claims that he is keeping the failing New York Times in business, an obvious exaggeration. However, I don't know how exaggerated that really is. But the former editor acknowledges that a Trump bump that saw digital subscriptions during his first 6 months in office jumped by 600,000 to more than 2 million. So, yeah, in a way, he kind of is keeping the failing New York Times in business. Mainly probably because the stories they write about him are so ridiculous and false that people just click on it and laugh. I mean, my God, the crap that they put out on a daily basis after they had to release an apology letter. All right, what is this guy's name? This Beckett guy. Well, the New York Times had to release an apology letter after Trump won, apologizing for their biased coverage, which was not an apology at all, as they're still doing it today. The Times has long faced accusations of liberal bias, which is true. It is a liberal publication. Even before Trump got into politics, and most of them are. These are all the New York Times, the Washington Post, the Huffington Post. These are all not conservative or right-leaning institutions by any stretch of the imagination. They're all very leftist publications. But that Abrahams' words carry special weight because she's also a former Times Washington bureau chief and Wall Street Journal correspondent specializing in investigative reporting. Beckett has said that Trump's attacks on the press are out of control, and it's important to use the word. It is important to use the word lie when the president tells a clear untruth. I'd still like to see that, but okay. In The Merchants of Truth, the business of news and the fight for facts, Abramson praised the brave and right, the brave as brave and right. Beckett's decision to run his headline when Trump abandoned the birtherism attacks on Barack Obama. Trump gives up a lie but refuses to repent. If you remember, the president to take back or to I believe set the record straight. On President Obama's birth certificate issue, he held a press event in which I believe members of the U.S. Armed Forces all came out and delivered their opinions on then the Republican candidate, President Trump. President Trump then came out. Told to everyone in the room that I believe all he said was President Obama was born in the United States, and then left. He took no questions, and he had nothing further to say. Now, some may think that may have pissed off some members of the media. I believe Don Lemon had a meltdown after this event occurred, but he went out and set the record straight. He went out and said that President Obama was born in the United States, that's it, and left. Which is really all he had to do. He didn't have to take any questions. I mean, so at least he did that. At least he went out and tried to set the record straight. I mean, there's still people who believe. Who knows? I mean, birth certificates and all that crap. As far as I'm concerned, Mr. Obama is a traitor to the United States, So it doesn't matter to me whether he was born in the United States or Kenya. He is a traitor, and that's just my opinion. Liz Spade, then the Times public editor, wrote that the paper, which concluded that more evidence was needed, appeared on the story, on publishing the story that would have linked the Trump campaign with Russian attempts to influence the election. So Liz Spade, the Times public editor, wrote that the paper that more evidence was needed, appeared too timid in not running the piece, produced by a team that included reporter Eric Lipidow. Back at C, at this scolding, Abramson says, an email Lichtblau, I believe. Lichtblau, I hope your colleagues rip you a new one. Beckett wrote that the most disturbing thing about Spade's column which really all this woman did was write a column about the Russian collusion. Spade's column was there. It was more was that there was what the most disturbing thing about that column was that there was information in it that came from a very confidential, really difficult conversations we had about whether or not to publish the back channel information. I guess I'm disappointed this ended up in print. It's hard for journalists to complain when confidential information goes public. That's what we do for a living after all, but I'll admit to you that they may find me less than open, less willing to invite debate the next time we have a hard decision to make. Lichtblau left the Times for CNN, where he was one of 3 journalists fired when the network retracted and apologized for his story, making uncorroborated accusations against Trump confidant Anthony Scaramucci, and the Times soon abolished the public editor's column. Abramson is critical of Trump as well. She calls his fake news attacks a cheap way of trying to undermine the credibility of the Times reporting, something to be accepted as the truth only by liberals in urban cosmopolitan areas. The Times, which broke the story of Hillary Clinton's private email server, which is true, they did, also made some bad judgment calls and blew its Clinton coverage out of proportion. So now they're trying to say that, that was all blown out of proportion after she lost. Abramson is candid in acknowledging her faults. When then publisher Arthur Sulzberger was considering promoting her to the top job, he told her over lunch at Le Bernardin, "Everyone knows there's a good Jill and a bad Jill. The big question for me is which one we'll see if you become the executive director, editor." She admitted to him that I could be self-righteous when I felt unheard. I interrupted. I didn't listen enough. So that was what she admitted to him. It was a heated battle with Paquette that led to her ouster in 2014. He was furious upon learning that she was trying to recruit another top journalist. Abramson says an executive ordered her to keep it a secret who would share the managing editor's title. Sulzberger called her in, fired her, and handed her a press release announcing her resignation. Abramson then replied, "Arthur, I've devoted my entire career to telling the truth, and I won't agree to this press release. I'm going to say that I've been fired." Her final judgment: "I was less than a stellar manager, but I also had been judged by an unfair double standard applied to many women leaders." So that's what that's the final word that she gave on that. Howard Kurtz is a Fox News analyst and the host of Media Buzz Sundays at 11 a.m. So we have that too. We have a former New York Times editor ripping the coverage of Donald Trump as biased, and I believe she was. I mean, even still, I believe that she was a little mild and delicate in her assessment of the situation. However, at least she admitted it. At least she had at least she's got the balls to say, yeah, it's biased. I mean, it's blatant, it's biased. And she even admitted that, she admitted her faults as a manager too. So, these publications they're not real news. They're fake news. The mainstream media is fake news. It's all corporate media. It all has an agenda. There is no more truth in journalism anymore. Journalism is essentially dead in America. When you have all the pundits and these anchors and these media guys with 6-7-figure salaries and blatant liberal agenda, and they all collude with the Democrat Party. So when you have someone come out and when another editor came out and admitted that, which I don't even understand about this, is the New York Times admitted themselves that the sole purpose of reporting on Donald Trump was to prevent him from winning, had to release an apology letter, which they now went back on because they're still not reporting fairly. You know, you have the Washington Post, you know, like I said, running a paragraph at the end of every story they ever ran about him, saying how much of a racist he is and how he's unfit to be president. So when you're dealing with publications and media outlets like this, you know, the American people could see right through it. You know, everyone knows it, and you know, it's becoming clearer and clearer by the day that the mainstream media in this country is not trusted, and that is the reason why they're dying. You know, they're so, I mean, they're so biased, and it's so blatant that they just admit it. And then when they get caught admitting it, they try to lie about admitting it, and it's a whole cycle. I mean, it makes no sense. You know, first they admit how biased they are, and now they're trying to backtrack after releasing an apology letter. I mean, the whole thing's confusing as hell, which is why it's all a bunch of BS. It's fake news. So, anyway, that being said, those were some stories of interest for today. Once again, thank you for joining us. Thank you for joining us here on Right Side News. That's been another edition of the Hoel Report. Please, like, subscribe, follow, and share. Follow us on Facebook, Twitter, the YouTube channel, Right Side News. Follow me on Twitter. Twitter handle is @JHHoel. As in the Hoel Report. For Right Side News, I'm Jim Hoel, and I am your voice. God bless you all, and have a good evening.